and welcome to Climbing Consulting, with me, your host, Nick Sinnott. Today's guests are Tim Smeaton and Simon Walker, co-founders of Kubrick Group. Kubrick is a rapidly growing data science consultancy, which has grown from an idea to over 100 consultants in just 18 months. Having successfully built and IPOd the global recruitment firm Hydrogen Group, Tim and Simon decided they wanted to build another business and saw a huge gap in the data science space, which led them to start Kubrick. It's worth saying that neither Tim or Simon come from a data background, and their story is a great case study for how making the right decisions early on can enable your firm to become a leader in your chosen industry. Not only is their growth story really impressive, but they've achieved it while pioneering a very different consulting model to the pyramid model prevalent in most management consulting businesses, something we cover in detail in today's episode. Simon and Tim were great guests and shared so much advice from their journey with Kubrick. There's something in here for everyone. Whether you want to know how to create your own consulting business, how you can future-proof your current consulting business, or you want to know how you can move into the cutting-edge area of data science. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Tim Smeaton and Simon Walker. Simon, Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Hi.
How are you doing today? Good day so far?
Yep, very good day so far.
Yeah?
Started well.
Yes, see how we go after doing this podcast with you.
I'm sure it'll continue, guys. I'm sure it'll continue. So just to kick us off, really, it'd be great for those who maybe don't know you as well, just to get a quick summary and overview of your career to date and how you got to where you are and why we're here today.
Yep. I'll go first, shall I?
Yep, definitely, yeah. That's the oldest one.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I was a civil engineer from Salford University, and I did a year of engineering and thought, yeah, this isn't really for me, standing outside in the rain. And it was at a time when IT and technology, sort of pre-2000, was coming into force, and it sounded like there was a lot of money in it. No one really knew what it was. So I entered the world of recruitment, basically, and worked within the technology sector, and had a bit of experience in that. And at the beginning of 2000, I had worked in the recruitment industry for 5 years, and I realised that I saw some opportunities for how it could be done differently. So I, with Simon and a couple of other people, established what was to become Hydrogen Group and built it up from scratch, from a small room like we're sitting in right now, for those listening, sort of 3 or 4 metres by 2 metres with a window, cables everywhere. And we built that up to a leading global recruitment business, revenues in excess of about 200 million. And I learned an enormous amount on that journey. I learned you only really need to get about 60% right of your decisions.
Okay.
You don't need to get everything right, but making decisions is really important. And I've learned a lot about hiring good people and working with them and so on. And we took that company to listed it on the London Stock Exchange, and my career came to an end there as CEO in 2013 when I had some new ideas with Simon about how we could come to the consulting market and make some real differences to both people who would join our organisation and also to the whole data industry and the clients that we could work with, really. So 20 years of hard work.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say mine was slightly more a rock and roll start. I started in film, and I did a year basically doing things like music videos and adverts. Realised a few things, actually. I learned a lot about myself. One, that I wasn't very good at it. probably had chosen the wrong degree. And
Good to find out early, I imagine.
Yeah, that's right. And I basically was also interested very much so in technology and what was happening in technology at the time. It was the beginning of the dot-com era. And I knew that I wanted to get involved in that as a career. And actually, I was fortunate enough to meet Tim. And again, for obviously this is on people listening, it was in a tiny little room. I was actually thinking that Tim maybe had been looking historically with rose-tinted spectacles, because I remember it as fairly awful. I don't remember it actually with a window even, but nonetheless, tiny little room. And Tim had a vision of how to be very different in that space. And it was the time when technology and business were starting to realise they needed to talk to each other. And that's where we wanted to specialise in. And that was very, very interesting to me, because then I suddenly realised that actually technology was then going to become mainstay. As soon as businesses realised that actually they had to be communicating to technology, and it wasn't just something that you parked away in the corner with, open sandals and long hair. It was actually something fundamental to accelerating your business. So yeah, we did that, and hydrogen was pretty much an incredible journey. The last 7 years of which, after we listed, I moved over to Singapore and grew our APAC operation up there. And it was a great journey. And then we came back and decided that we should do it all again, really.
And so we will come on to so many questions off the back of that, guys. We'll come on to the why you decided to do it all again, because one can only assume that as you did so successfully, you built hydrogen, you IPO'd, it was a want, not a need, that led you to do it again and lead you here. But I want to start with the point you were saying about the little room, how you met. So how did you meet?
I'll probably answer that. I think I can definitely remember it very factually. I've got to give Tim his credit. He's an incredible employer. He can spot real talent. So I was actually his first employee. I mean, I don't know how he spots them, but he did. But no, I was talking to a lot of different technology organisations, and one of them was the Little Room, which at the time was known as Project Partners. But yeah, it was definitely the worst premises. But the idea and the concept, no one was talking about that, and that's how we met. It was the first interview, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's a commonly sort of held statement that a lot of people employ, which is, you hire on attitude and potential, not on necessarily on competency, particularly for more junior members of staff. And my track record has always been based upon that. And Simon, as he's quite rightly said, turned up for interview, and he looked like he had lots of potential, and we've become great friends ever since, and now we're business partners, really. So there were plenty of others as well, just so we're aware. But yeah, I mean, it was as easy as that. 20 years ago nearly.
Yeah, 20 years ago, yeah.
Wow. And so then fast forwarding 2013, you'd IPO'd, Tim, you'd left the business to do other things. What was it that led you to start a consulting business?
Well, behind every great company, regardless of what they invent, be it WhatsApp with however many employees it was, selling for how many billion, there have to be some great minds and some great people behind them. So my background has always been in industries where you're effectively enabling organisations to use great minds and great people. When we were building Hydrogen Group, that's effectively what we were doing, but we were acting as brokers. And the writing was on the wall, in my opinion, earlier on than 2013, that industry would become effectively, to a degree, digitised. Margins would decrease, there'd be amalgamation of large companies, which you see in maturing markets, and so on. So we started talking about what other ways are there effectively to ensure that organisations have got the right level of bright-minded, intelligent individuals that can help them, with their challenges or with the opportunities they face as organisations. So it was really born from that basic principle, and what we really wanted to do was basically take more risk.
Yeah.
Because as a broker, the barriers to entry are very, very low, effectively. The hotels never saw Airbnb coming.
Yeah.
Now they thought the barrier to entry was very, very high because it would cost a lot of money to build a hotel. But actually, of course, what transpired was we all have lots of spare rooms. And so in the same vein, being a broker in recruitment, of course, the barriers to entry are very low. So we wanted effectively to build a business where we could build the product, where we would take the risk, and therefore the return would be greater. And we would actually have our own people undertaking this work, and we would take great pride in them, and we would invest significantly in making them into these sorts of individuals. So that's kind of how the idea came. It wasn't specifically around data, it was more about the difference between being a broker and actually effectively having a product of your own.
I think the data element came kind of after we realised what was happening with our own market. And I always say that the concept for Kubrick came from frustration, because it became very evident when we started to speak to organisations that data was going to feature as a main part in their strategy. And they were using it as a very large, broad brushstroke. But what they were saying was there seemed to be kind of an excitement setting in for what the opportunity of data, the correct use of data and the insights that data can create, but also a frustration that they weren't able to do it, and also a fear with actually how to handle that data and the risks associated to that. So I think we started to get an inclination this is something that we could help with. And the model that we wanted to employ was being able to bring in a very, very highly skilled young workforce. And really the idea began to be born out of that. We called it the 2-year conundrum, where if you look at lots of companies, you could tell the fear with companies that they knew they wanted young people because they wanted them to grow with the organisation. And if you just had a cursory glance at what they were looking for, it was all must have 2 years. So it was this kind of protective layer, and there just weren't enough people with 2 years data engineering, data science skills around. And that's when suddenly we realised we might actually have something. Although, as Tim rightly said, with a very high barrier of entry, not just from the point of view of actually building the product and cash and investment, but actually it's a really, really technical subject that needs a lot of time and thought if you're going to prepare someone correctly. So I'd say that's where, we knew what the model was, we knew what we wanted to get away from, and then suddenly data started to become more and more apparent as time went by, really, didn't it?
But how did you test that model? So you guys decided this was a great place to go. What did you do to actually make sure that was the right place to go before piling cash, time, effort into it?
Well,
or did you not?
Well, no, I did, because the reality was, the reason why I left Hydrogen Group as the CEO was, as a public company, I wasn't fully in control of it, and I actually wanted to switch the model. So actually, I went to some of the organisations that we worked with at Hydrogen Group and said, look, I think the market's changing. I don't think you need a broker anymore. I think it's going to be digitised. And I think there are ways in which we could add further value. And I ran this concept past some of them and they bit my arm off.
Wow, okay.
The problem was that I couldn't convince the board of Hydrogen Group that this was the right direction to take the organisation within. So in effect, the concept was validated prior to me exiting, because it was in fact the reason why I left.
Gosh, okay, so you actually tried to take this as the model for hydrogen to transform into, and then when they said no thanks, Tim, you decided you'd take it forward.
That's right, because ultimately what we have to be very clear on is that why organisations love us is because we're carrying £500,000 worth of risk, because it costs us that much to train them for 4 months before we hand them out to projects effectively. So that's a very different working capital and cash flow model than you would have as a broking firm.
Yeah.
So therefore, that what they didn't want was that cash flow risk. It wasn't that they didn't think the model was valid. They just didn't want to take on board that additional level of risk. And conversely, you can think that about our clients as well. That's why they use us, because their P&Ls just don't allow for them to go and spend that level of money on training. So we take what is effectively CapEx and turn it into OpEx for them.
We have had clients that have attempted it, and they're still our clients. So obviously they don't, they're not a training business. They're not set up to train someone intensively from scratch all the way through to actually being an effective data engineer in 16 weeks. They can't do it. They have a job to do. That's not their setup. And obviously they use us because we take on that cost and we take on that risk. And fundamentally, even though we don't have people brought back, if they wanted to, they know that it's very low risk for them, because they could trial someone from Kubrick and say, that's not quite us, that's not working, so have them back. So we really do take on their risk.
I really want to come on to that, because that's, I think we'll spend a lot of time on how your model is different from the traditional pyramid-style consultancy. But just to that point, Tim, you're carrying 500k of risk to simply train your people.
Yeah.
How, and mainly this is for people listening who are thinking of starting their own business, how did you get from the people you sounded out on this, how did you know that they were actually desperate for it versus sort of being nice because they know Tim and, the old problem of, it's a great idea. Everyone loves the idea until you ask them to buy.
Yeah. Well, none of them were going to sign a piece of paper up front saying, yeah, sounds like a great idea, we'll have it.
And we did try.
Well, I think it's like all things, isn't it? If you are an entrepreneur by nature, you probably have a risk barometer that is different to a corporate individual, effectively. So I've never worked for anyone, apart from, a year as a civil engineer doing a sewage treatment plant extension in Plymouth, which was a pretty high-powered executive role that I had there.
And that's why you left.
Yeah. The puns around shit jobs and everything always go a long way. But so, of course, I'm not minded to be fearful of the consequences to my career by taking a risk, because, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. So I just saw one particular financial institution, eyes light up when I explained the concept to them and said, if we had 10 of these people and we trained them on, it wasn't actually data specifically, it was kind of a bit more bland than that. And they said, yeah, absolutely, I think we could have 50. I really noticed that. So I think if you are going to set up a consulting business, or any other business for that matter, you've got to have an angle, you've got to have a point of differentiation, and you've got to really believe it's a point of differentiation. Your clients have got to believe it's a point of differentiation, and then you have to take a leap of faith. And whether or not you're doing it individually, where perhaps your initial outlay is low, or whether or not you're getting backing and various rounds of funding where your investment is high, you sooner or later you've got to take the leap. And the biggest and toughest decision you'll take in building your own business will be the decision as to whether or not you open it in the first place. And someone else said that to me, and it's kind of stuck with me. Yeah. I can't remember who. But it's a bloody good quote.
Make it yours.
And so correct me if I'm wrong, Kubrick's now 100 people big? Just over 100 people?
Just over 100 people, yeah.
So, and that's 2 years, you've been open just over 2 years. I think last time we caught up, it was coming up.
I'd say trading a year and a half.
So, I mean, that's phenomenal growth for any business in that time. When you were setting out, you decided you were going to take the risk, did you guys have a plan for we're going to be 100 big in a year and a half? 200 big?
Yeah, but you can't knock us for confidence.
Shoot the stars.
Yeah. I would say early on, it was definitely the plan has turned out to be a realistic plan.
Yeah.
I'd just say the shape of the plan probably the first maybe 6 months versus now was slightly different. Because it is a different model, and as much as people are very keen. You've also got, we deal with predominantly large organisations, because the organisations that want to use us have a lot of data, and historically what comes with that is, they have data challenges that they need solving. So to get through procurement and also get them to understand something that's new and different definitely took longer than we first anticipated.
Yeah.
And then once they do, now I would say that every cohort of 15 that we have coming through, it's probably around 90% return business. So we have a lot of organisations relying on us now for their data engineers, data analysts. Sometimes they use them as junior data scientists coming through.
Yeah. I mean, the challenge for us is that we're a very operationally geared business. So what I mean by that is that there was a hugely significant investment required up front by Simon and I as individuals to actually get the business operational. So in our style of financial model and operational model is such that we have to go for it.
Yeah.
It is not a financially viable model to effectively pussyfoot around because it is so operationally geared. The great thing about the type of model that we have, of course, though, is that once you reach a certain point in time, then the operational gearing doesn't need to grow at the same pace as the consulting headcount. So we had to grab it by the ears, whatever you say. I can't remember what the saying is, but
horns.
We had horns. I think, Simon, not the ears.
Don't worry, I'm here.
You had to grab it by the ears and horns, and have a plan. But the other thing I would say is that we don't have a business model that's a 4-year plan, and we aim for that. We have a living and breathing financial model that is changed monthly.
Okay.
That's a very different.
Yeah, could you give a bit more background on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have seen I've been on the journey from a 4-man organisation to 600 people, corporate, mini corporate, I think I would term it as. And I've seen the positives and negatives of budgeting processes.
Yeah.
I've seen how they can become hugely detrimental. You end up managing people through fear, and people become risk adverse. And actually, you think you're giving them more accountability and ownership by having a business plan and a P&L and a budget, but actually you're not. You're actually generally eroding that. So, and a lot of that stemmed, in my opinion, from being a public company. You need to report to the city. Plus or minus 10% movement on your profit requires a profit warning or an upgrade. These are things that in a highly volatile marketplace, in a secular business like recruitment, where we've got the GFC, global financial crisis behind us, these make a mockery, really, the equity markets of running a business, because you're just aiming for something that you wrote a year ago and the whole world's moved on. So the reason why I say that is the pace of change is so fast now in the world that actually, something we know now we won't have known a month ago that could be really, really monumentally important to us at Kubrick Group. We never really thought we would have a proper technical projects team full of much more senior people until year 4 of our business plan, and we've already got that within it at the moment. Yeah. And if we'd had a business plan that just said, we won't have one of those till year 4, then we wouldn't be entrepreneurial or opportunistic. So the benefit of having a good financial model that is robust, that is constantly managed appropriately, is it enables you just to make sure you're not investing too early, making sure that you're not investing too late, you're keeping up with the pace of change, and just shows all the percentages that you need to be hitting between your revenue, your gross profit, and your net profit. And it's a management tool to keep in check. So everyone's not spending too much money.
How does that work? So if someone's listening to this and thinking, I buy that, I want to try that model. Is it the two of you get together in front of a spreadsheet and you have 4 or 5 key metrics? Is it one big cash flow spreadsheet? Is it even a spreadsheet? How do you actually manage this process, and what are your key metrics?
Well, I think you've got to go even further back than that.
Well, because how we're defined. Because we're defined by the cohorts we train. Okay. Obviously, we can't rush that. So that has to be, the cohorts that we train will take 16 weeks, and it has to be of very, very high quality. So that's one of the first kind of elements to take into account that then's able to be able to have your cash flow and what you're going to make from it. And
I think the other thing also that's probably worth mentioning is that people build businesses for lots of different reasons. You can build a business to sell it, you can build a business for income, you can build a lifestyle business, you can do all sorts of different things. And depending on what your goal is for the business, then you will have a different style of running that organisation. If you are building it for fast growth, where you're using private equity a lot, then you are going to be running that business for cash. So you might as well forget about P&L, because it's all about the cash. Simon and I have funded this business ourselves. We've taken an enormous risk, basically laid all our money on the line on it. So we run it as a cash-based model. So I actually think it all starts with the end goal in mind, which is kind of like what are the points of failure? So, we don't, we need a P&L, show the banks and all that type of stuff, but the reality is actually is cash is king. So I would always start with the cash flow, and I'd always build in, I don't know if you've ever seen film, programs like Grand Designs. Yep. Yeah, they always come in, how did you do against your budget? Oh, it was 200% of what we thought it was going to be. Well,
it's always a lovely house, though.
It's always a lovely house. Well, you can build a lovely company if you spend 200% more on it than you expected as well. So anyway, that's the other point I'd say, is that conservatism is king generally.
Yeah. I think we really should come on to the model, because it's very different to many other consultancies, and I think it will help people understand a lot of what you're talking about. Before though, I do just want to ask you. You mentioned the entrepreneur thing, the risk taking or the attitude to risk. Was there ever a conversation between you two where you'd done the model and you'd gone, right, we've got to put a ton of cash in here? It's our own cash. Did you have a conversation down the pub of, right, are we going to do this? If so, what questions did you ask each other, or privately, did you ask yourself? We've just IPO'd, I don't know, you might not have needed to do this. I think Simon, you said to me when we first caught up, you had one business left in you. What questions did you ask yourselves or each other before, pushing the go button on Kubrick?
That's a really good question. I think, I'm speaking for myself here, but my question was the product and what we were offering, was it something that was really viable? Funnily enough, the cash question for me was secondary, because if I had any doubt on the model, because it was different and it was unique, if I had any doubt on the model that maybe people weren't going to buy, or that wasn't where the market was going, and what was unique about it, why would people buy it? If I had any questions around that, I wasn't going to do it. So it didn't really stem from the cash, although probably my wife might somewhat disagree. It was really what our proposition was, and that had to be tight. And that has not changed from day one, really, fundamentally, of what we do.
My questions really were less to Simon, but more to myself before sort of us talking about it, really, which was I'd never set up a business by myself, and I'd certainly never back one either. I've invested in quite a lot of organisations, small startups, and I always look for people who are at least a couple. Not that we're a couple, if you know what I mean. But like a threesome or whatever.
Even worse. Even worse. Wow.
There we go.
Wow.
But you know what I mean. So the question I really asked myself was, if I'm going to do this, who do I want to do it with? And I wanted to make sure that's another pun as well, isn't it? But no, I wanted to make sure that I would set up the business with somebody where there was a good enough ability to have a robust conversation without hurting each other's feelings. I'd want to do it with somebody where there was a complementary skill set. Simon and I have always worked very well together in that he's got his role and I've got mine. And the only point where we might ever get contentious or something would be contentious and we'd argue about something is probably the bits in the middle where we're not sure who owns what.
Yeah, the grey areas. Yeah.
So they're the questions I asked myself, and then the points that Simon said, really. And could I put up with working with Simon for the next 10 years again?
Yeah.
That was a no.
Or could he live without doing it? No.
Fantastic, guys. I think you mentioned it again there, and I think it'd be great to actually spend some time on the model. Yeah. I think just as open as that, could you give for my listeners just an outline of actually what Kubrick is and what the model is and why it's unique?
Yeah, sure. Well, Kubrick was set up to enable organisations to solve their data challenges. And we do that differently to most. We look at more of a longer term solution for clients. The way we do that is we employ what we call junior professionals. So sometimes they're fresh graduates or they're 1 or 2 years in industry, but the common denominator of them all is they have exceptionally strong applied mathematics. They're very, very logical, and they have very good, compelling communication skills. And what we do is we employ those people. To get to that stage of employing them is, I think we'll talk about it later, but is a fairly arduous process because we've got to make sure that they're the right people. And then we train them in a data toolkit. And that, as we mentioned before, that takes 16 weeks. But we train them in a toolkit that enables them to be able to be a disciplined data engineer and then provide analysis on that data. So they train in SQL, Python, the Python libraries for more machine learning, and also how to visualize data and their findings. So we fit that into 16 weeks within our data labs. Here, it's all in-house. It's done by our training team. And then we give them to our organizations to help them with their data challenges. And our guys have, with us, a 2-year training bond, because obviously it costs a lot of money and time to be able to train them to the level that they're required to be able to hit the ground running at client sites. And what we say to clients is once that training bond drops away, you're more than welcome to employ that person directly so they can increase their own in-house capability. And what we found is a lot of the organizations we work with have validated this model now, because we're getting to the stage where our first group's going through, they're all being offered. And
so they're being offered jobs by their end client.
That's right, yeah. And that's no cost to them.
So there's not recruitment.
No.
You don't take a commission.
No, it's that 2-year program for us. They get to bring on staff that they've probably put a lot of time in and they've got to know, and they've become very valuable. And it's a lot of our clients have described it as a bit of we had one client that said this is how modern consultancies should be. And they use it as a longer term staff augmentation model. And on the flip side, the people that join us have an incredible opportunity to accelerate their career in fundamentally data being an exceptionally exciting industry, and one that I think they would find very, very difficult to get into without that foundation of training.
I want to come on to the staff and more into the model, but how did you two get it? So you obviously, know this area, you're experts in it, but day one, you're not from a data background, you're from a recruitment background. How did you actually get to the point where you could be credible in this industry and then you actually hire people, like you said, sort of the top 1% of mathematicians? I think you said last time it's something like 1 in every 60 candidate applications actually gets through. So how did you get to the point where you had the knowledge, team, confidence to actually be able to go and sell that as a product to candidates and clients?
I mean, honestly, spending a lot of money. That sounds really sort of such a sort of obvious thing to say, but we went and hired a team of advisors. So what we weren't looking for is advisors on how to grow the organisation, because we'd done that before, but we were looking for advisors around the world of data. So we hired 4 advisors, and then we hired some technical people, and we got those advisors to oversee the creation of what we were going to train people in to make sure it was relevant. And then we got people from industry who weren't trainers. We don't employ trainers, we employ technical specialists. And we worked very, very hard for about 8 months, 9 months, to effectively create it was originally a 14-week program. We actually extended it after the first couple of intakes, but to create, if you will, a curriculum, because the complexity lay obviously in what you're saying about the world of data and so on, but the complexity actually lay in how do you get these individuals to do some work for 14 weeks whereby they're going to learn an absolute load and it's not theoretical. So we also had to get clients on board who would give us mini projects to do during the training.
Okay.
So, so it's lots of inputs and we didn't know what we didn't know at the time, but we knew it. We kind of had a vision in our mind of what that experience had to be like during that 14 weeks and what they had to come out looking like. So the complexity lay in what we actually physically got them to do. Because we can write SQL, Python, whatever. You can write the recruitment consulting shopping list of data, can't you, that you see on all the job ads? But that is highly irrelevant, really. It's kind of what are these guys going to do in their first 100, 200, 300 days with our clients on these projects, and will they be productive in week one? And a lot of that is to do with actually making sure they can actually do some stuff, as well as being able to code in Python or whatever that might be. So that's where the complexity lay. And to be truthful, we threw a lot of people at it and spent a lot of time working on it and creating something. And the first couple of groups that we did, I think we probably we give ourselves a 6 out of 10, to be fair, probably in terms of what we've done. And now we've got a very dynamic environment where I would say with every intake of people, it changes about 10 to 15% what they're experiencing during their 16 weeks. Now, that's partly due to the pace of change within our industry, but that's predominantly due to the fact of the feedback loop that we go through with our clients and with our people. We keep getting that little bit better. We drop this, we pick this up, and so on. So I think the biggest lesson I've learned from it is just how much energy, effort, and intellectual horsepower has to go into designing effectively the experience that they have during that 14, initially now 16-week period. We still haven't cracked it though.
No, it's always improving. That's fine. That's right.
And so that's the sort of internal side. You've put that effort into developing your training. How did you initially actually find these candidates? Right now you're a brand, people know you. How did you set out to find the best of the best in this field?
What we did was we undertook basically to get a huge amount of feedback from people that knew. And we quickly managed to build a picture of what people would say, and all soft and technical skills, but what would they look for that would make a phenomenal consultant in data, a data specialist. And we quickly started to write tests to see if we could validate that. So during an interview process, could we test them on certain aspects, be it logic, inductive reasoning, maths? Could we find tests that would actually be able to pull out some of these traits? And then I think that Tim and I were we were definitely competent in being able to look at the softer skills that we knew would work. So, a high degree of questioning and how they question, not just someone that would do something without questioning it. And we have, I won't say what they are here because there might be people listening that maybe want to apply to us, and so I wouldn't want to give them any advantages. And basically that got better and better. And now I would say we have a series of tests that we quickly are able to establish whether we think that someone will be good and perform well at a client site, and gives us a good foundation to then train the technical toolkit on top of that.
I mean, the other thing is we are a data company, so we collect data from the minute someone applies to the minute they effectively would leave our employment. So we know, through validating how we test, how we video interview, how we telephone interview, and so on, what good looks like when they're out physically with consulting with our clients. And we've had that feedback loop complete. We've actually done some really great visualizations in using tools like Tableau, one of our partners, to actually show what elements of our training might actually have the biggest impact on the client feedback on them that we didn't realise. But I would actually add one other thing that I don't know if you remember, Simon, but I brought in a guy who was ex-MI5, who went to marry one of our members of staff, Denise. Do you remember his name? I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
And we brought him in.
He gave us a fake name.
Yes. And he came in And he really impressed me. He was a bit strange, but he really impressed me when I met him because he had these incredible observation skills, and he designed sort of scenario-based games that they would obviously use in the government to assess people. So I thought that'd be a really great idea for us as a leadership team to start using some of these just to test our skills. We went through a period of about a year and a half as a leadership team that was hell because these things really highlighted.
And what is so this, just to help clarify, scenario-based as in, the business goes bust, there's a recession, what's the
Yes,
scenario?
I mean, they were perhaps, the ones that we undertook were slightly more kind of out there type situations, everything from doing with, you're living on an island to, this type of natural disaster happens and all this type of stuff that, they're designed to put you under pressure. So we don't use necessarily that type of thing here, but what we learned from that is actually putting people under pressure and having to test their resolve and capability to think both creatively and logically was actually really what we were looking for. So what we did was we designed certain challenges that I can't go into that effectively are not necessarily uncomfortable, but are pretty testing because you haven't got a lot of time to think about solutions to quite abstract challenges. So, none of our, as Simon said, if anyone's going to apply, none of our testing or scenario-based challenges are anything to do with being a data consultant.
No.
What they are to do with are having to come up with ideas in a field of expertise you may already have to solve some problems using a certain process that we may give them. So we've worked hard on designing those. You can't find them anywhere else. They're our secret sauce in finding good people, really. And we can see an absolute direct correlation between the tests that Simon's talked about and these challenges that we give them and the client feedback that we have. And that's what's made our hiring better.
And what is it that's helped you attract good people in the first place? So, this sounds fantastic. To get to this point, that you've got to fill the hopper of simply people applying.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we've gathered recent feedback on people that have applied to us. And one of the things, so there's various reasons, but one of the ones that stands out at the moment is that current graduate programs and rotation programs are not working for a lot of people. So within data, it really does require to have a strong specialism and understanding in that field. And if you're on a typical graduate rotation program for maybe one of the big four, you are jumping from department to department. And actually, you need a deep understanding of this. Also, it has helped at the moment that it's an industry that I think gets a lot of press and a lot of people understand it and want to get into it. So we are attractive because we are getting people and we are specialising in that field. And they see us as a real accelerator, a real platform. So we're definitely having applications increasing at the moment as our brand builds and people start understanding more about what we are. Our referrals have increased, I would say, quite dramatically. Every group that we have through, we will always have kind of a good 20% that referrals from our current staff. And, the fact that I think that they are going to be prepared and they're in technologies that people hear about and want to know about and want to learn. It's an attractive proposition for them. You are paid to train. We pay these guys a salary whilst they sit there in our data labs and learn all this really, really cool tech.
And so how at the start, though, you've decided to build this, you're planning a lot of money and you've brought on your advisory panel. Were there any conversations at the start when maybe you have that tension of, do we scale quickly by lower, you set out to build a premium product, get premium people in. Did you ever face any challenges around speed of growth versus quality of candidates? Because and this might not have been a challenge.
Yeah, I think we have different challenges to growth at different phases. And probably what surprised us the most is the challenges to our growth are not what we thought they would be when we originally wrote the business plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
what did you think they were versus
well,
what they are now?
I think you've hit the nail on the head with one of them. I think we thought it would be really hard to hire the right number of people of the right quality, so we didn't drop that ball. We probably underestimated how difficult it would be to actually train them in a manner that was, you can go on, people just have to go on Glassdoor or something like that to see that it is really intense. in every way, shape, or form. So it's intensely fun, it's intensely challenging, you're supported, but it's, it's an intense working day. It's not sort of standing there with someone writing on a whiteboard, here's some Python code. So I think in answer to your question, really, the challenges to growth really we're finding, and I suspect we will continue to find, are how good we want really amazing people who want to develop people. And lots of people say, God, you've got a really, really authentic business there. We really like that. I mean, a lot of people have said to us that it's a good business. The organisation I don't work for, I work at Company X, they don't invest in training like they used to. What you're doing is really great, particularly people who have got, kids who are in their teens up to about 30 years old. They often see us as very admirable, is a common word, in terms of what we do. So our challenge really is making sure that quality that Simon alluded to before in our development of these people and the experience they have when they're with us is absolutely awesome. And we've got a lot of things wrong, coincidentally. As I said to you before, you get about 60 to 70% of the stuff right in a business, in my experience, and the market's right for the business will fly. But our hindrance to growth is having some people in our HQ at the moment, this is being totally transparent, who want to develop, these junior professionals into data experts and take utter pride in doing that. And that, I think, will be, if it was that easy to develop people, then everyone would be doing it.
Yeah.
And that's our, that's our special sauce as well, that we've really worked very hard on.
And I think that it's a very interesting differentiator between the traditional model and your own. Your business model, and very overtly, is you come in, we train you to this really high standard, you stay with us for 2 years on client, and then I almost get the sense you're encouraged to leave. Not you don't have to, but your clients might take you might have a job elsewhere. How have people responded to that? Is that...
What do you mean, the people that work with us?
So both people who work with you and clients. So I'll do the people that work for us. You can do the clients.
Yeah.
So what we witness is that initially people come here because of the quality of the training, effectively, and they want to accelerate their career into the data industry. So it's only really as they continue on their journey with us that they start thinking about what they really want their career to look like. So when they join us, we say to them, you can join the clients directly. We expect about 75%, 80% of people to do that. We don't know that. We were kind of guessing at the time because obviously we hadn't done it before. And maybe 20% might stay with us because they want a consulting style, more transient type of role. I think what happens though when we see people go out onto our client projects is they become a little bit more native. They kind of go native on site, as we would call it. So I think it's just a natural progression that a lot of these people will want to transition onto the workforce. That said, we are building, and what we have built already and are scaling our own internal projects team, which has got more senior people in, which we utilise for, onboarding our people on site to clients, or more shorter term projects, or even where we're given problems in our data labs here to try and innovate and work a solution for a client outside their environment. Proof of concept, etc. So we want to keep some, but we want those people probably to be the people who like change, who want to have a transient career, who like working with lots of different clients. Not everyone particularly enjoys that. So I think time will tell, but...
And a client perspective, I would say that would be one of the key attractive factors about us. One is that we have a competitive cost point and people are very, very highly skilled. The other one would be that they are keen on being able to look at this as a longer term solution. A lot of the projects they're working on is, this is something that a lot of them are at the beginning of their data journey. And they see this as a long journey, so they want people to grow up within the organisation, and this is one route of doing it. And we already know with this group going through that our clients are very, very keen to retain those people.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever think about this one, but if you're going to scale a consulting business, that ultimately, really making it quite black and white, there's only two ways to do it. Either you basically recruit and train your own people, or you hire from others and suffer wage inflation. And most organisations maybe try and do a little bit of both. But for those people who might be listening who are trying to start it from scratch, that the barrier to entry is going to be generally around, have you kind of got the ability and finances and resources available to you actually train your own staff? So of course, they're probably going to end up having to team up with other people to actually build their own consulting businesses to start with. We've always built businesses by bringing people in and training them, and we've been really amazed by the loyalty that people have. They called them the snowflakes and Generation Z and lots more derogatory terms, but I don't think they're any different to eons ago when I was their age. If I'm entirely honest, there's some that are really ambitious, that are really loyal, who really, are very grateful for what we give them, and there are some that aren't. Just the same. There was the
I agree.
So Tim, just something you mentioned there around sort of the standard consulting business model. Again, this is both a question from a sort of business growth side for yourselves, but equally when you take it out to clients, the typical consulting model is a pyramid, and you make the most money on the junior people, which, like a pyramid scheme, filters up, and you make less money on the people at the top. Something that is quite unique about what you're doing is, firstly, you've only got the most junior layer, which most people would go, fantastic, you'll be raking it in. Then actually, though, you charge them out at what I would say is a phenomenally low consulting day rate. We've talked about the training they go through, the type of people, and then you're charging them out at probably half, if not a third or a quarter of what some of the sort of more traditional consulting firms are doing. I'd be really interested, actually, how you set on that and how you've approached it from a business growth side, but equally, how do you sell that to clients? Because there's a danger that it almost becomes too cheap, and they worry, what am I getting for, if it's too good to be true, it mustn't be true.
I think that our challenge was not price orientated, but was proving the quality of the people. Because, whether it's plus or minus 200 quid a day to some of our clients, the actual cost to them would be, if I bring this person on board and they screw something up, or they're a bit of a pain, or actually they're nowhere near as good as I hope they'll be, that there is a hugely much greater intangible loss than actually, a few weeks of paying them 500 quid a day or whatever and kicking them off site. So, we did have to get over that, and what we did was we went out and we set a price point whereby we would get people's attention, and we purposefully wanted to have a broad range of organisations that were across sector, so we're sector agnostic because we're data experts. And a lot of our clients like the fact we don't have domain experience because we think about solving problems in a different manner. But I think the other thing to think about is that I talk about the recruitment industry from my previous experience there. It was a boys' club, or whatever you want to call it. I'm not being sexist when I say that, but it was a club.
Yeah.
Everyone charged high margins, and off we went. And there's lots of industries that do that. There's the property industry, for example, as well, isn't there? There's brokers on both sides of a deal, which acquisition agents and selling agents, and things of this nature. So I think there's just industry pockets where they've had very good margins, and then people come along and have a crack and disrupt that. And the ways in which they do it, either through a price point or through digitising it, or through adding some value that's quite significant. And we purposefully came into this consulting market within the data industry, wanting to demonstrate that we were the type of consultancy that you'd want to do business with, because the price point's right. And secondly, we don't march off site with our people when the work is done so that you want us back again. We let you keep them at the end of that period if that's what you want to do. So we thought there was just a really great opportunity to have a business whereby we'd make a huge difference to the people that we hired by accelerating their career, and we'd make a huge difference to our clients because we'd charge at a totally transparent rate that would generate the margins that we're looking for the type of business model we had, and they would get really, really good quality. So, we're unashamedly cheap, but high quality.
Yeah.
And the other side of that point is, and it's another more traditional side to the model, is most consulting firms are engagement based. So, and this is probably more towards your senior engineer. We have a fixed problem, we need people to come in and solve it. Your model is almost the reverse of that, is we have great people who you can point to what you want for as long as you want. The challenge you may get with that, though, is clients saying, well, look, you're giving me a junior guy, 16 weeks is fantastic, but they're 16-week trained, and they've got no senior oversight from your team. And correct me at any point. But how do you help clients see past that, or what are the challenges that you had to respond to and help clients through?
Funnily enough, we haven't had that a lot from clients as a challenge. And I think that one of the elements of consulting that probably wasn't working for clients is actually they did have business as usual or or run the company projects that required someone there to be on there daily and be working under the guidance of the client. And I think they were using some of the larger consultancies that were more expensive in that way. And actually, we do work on statements of work. We do work with objectives and end goals. But what we're giving them is something different. We're giving them someone that will grow with them, that can be pointed to projects. In fact, we've got loads of examples where a lot of our guys are on finite projects. But we know that or our clients certainly know there'll be another one at the end of it, and they don't give them back. And I suppose that does, reflect on our price point as well, is that it will require some client guidance and help. But don't get me wrong, our whole aim of the training and preparing them is that they will hit the ground running and they are competent. But they don't have domain experience per se.
I think the other thing also is, you think about a modern organisation, really, it's really hard to describe the interactions and how everybody works together in a contract.
Yeah.
So, I don't know any projects in these organisations where you could really, truly carve it out and say that it is being run by the consulting firm. And that is a lot of reasons why a lot of these large consulting firms do so well, because they sort of, their web kind of filters out across the entire organisation into multiple projects, and then everyone's writing change notes and all this type of stuff, and that becomes an industry, and then you've got a big PMO facility, and effectively that happens. So I think there's also just a realisation potentially that actually, much more blended solutions of combinations on project teams of some domain knowledge and permanent employees of that organisation, some consultants, maybe some expert oversight from a consulting firm where they really are experts in a particular field, creates a more and better response. Now, the flip side to that, of course, is how do you actually cover your bases legally and try and hold accountable the organisations that you're bringing in that sort of blended solution. But it must be such that the line managers and the directors who are trying to deliver these projects feel that way and like that blended solution and like the agility of it, because they really want to go that way. Now, procurement and other channels within an organisation that are there from a more control-orientated approach, they might not like that so much because it's hard to pin people down. But I think, I don't know, I don't see, I'm the same as Simon, I don't see that feedback from clients as an issue.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it.
Brilliant, good to hear. So I do want to come on to some more point advice for junior colleagues, but I think that the last question really on your journey, and Tim, it's something you've mentioned a couple of times around, if you get 6 out of 10, you're going to be successful. You're now sort of those 2 years in, what is it you wish you knew? What is it you and take it as how many, I don't mind, but what is it you wish you knew back at the start that 2 years in now you would have helped you accelerate that journey even faster?
Well, I've got to say, I can go back across my entire career and say I still make some of the same stupid mistakes that I did when I started the business. So and I'm still making them now, probably. Only hire people where you walk out the room going, no matter what it takes, I've got to get that person on board in my company. And if you don't walk out of the room saying that, don't hire them.
Yeah.
And I continuously make that mistake because work piles up. You need people. Jobs have got to get done. So we lower the standard every once in a while. So that's one thing I think really sticks with me. Still drop my guard on it.
It's funny enough where we're not involved with the HQ staff for the operational day-to-day running of the business. I think we can sometimes make that mistake. Probably where Tim and I have set the rules for our consultants coming in, and we've set these black and white rules and tests. Those mistakes aren't made because it's being run by other people, not Tim and I taking a chance on people.
Yeah. And I definitely would say. Another thing I would say, okay, I might not be asking you a question specifically here, but these are things that sort of resonate with me, is that, I think to be good at starting your own business and growing your own business, you have a sort of barometer, which is kind of like a risk one, but is also a barometer between gut feel and evidence-based. And one of the problems I've experienced in the businesses that Simon and I have built before is that we have tended to be too gut feel. And actually, the gut feel to evidence-based decision barometer tool is a situational tool. So another good piece of advice I could give is that sometimes when you need to make a decision, you need to do it on gut feel. And that might be when no evidence is available or it's a quick decision that's required, like starting your business. You might just want to get on with it. And we definitely did a lot of gut feel on that. But sometimes you want to use evidence-based criteria to make a decision. And I think, if I look back at the most costly mistakes that we have made together, individually or whatever it might be, it has been when the barometer was in the wrong place for the decision that needed making.
Yeah.
And so to have a good business partner, which I said before, was one of my biggest considerations as to, Simon and I working together, was can that other person hold the tension on saying, are you answering, not are you right, but is the style that you are utilising to answer the challenge correct for the situation that you're in? So, and I still make those mistakes as well. Gut feel, too quick a decision when a slower one is required.
I think also it's interesting when I've seen other people start their business, how people seem to revel in being a startup. And what that sometimes screams to me is that they don't want to do the stuff that they don't want to do. They want to do all the fun things like go to conferences and pontificate over an espresso and kind of draw amazing plans. And I think where Tim and I have worked well together is sometimes you don't want to do things, but they're really key to the business and you have to execute and you have to be disciplined and you have to do the things that are going to make the difference. And, we both have seen startups and we both invested in startups where I would say that probably the people running those didn't necessarily want to execute on the things that needed to be done and put the hard work in areas where, probably wasn't that fun. And I think that's really, really key because we both invested in companies outside.
Amazing companies.
Yeah, incredible ideas, but haven't.
Just no execution.
Yeah,
a very, very good one was, I'm not going to go into it now, but a very good one was, you really got me thinking about this, was a company that developed a really cool product for hotels that was well ahead of the market. And it was really cool. I mean, investors were jumping through hoops to put money into it. But did any of them want to either hire a salesperson or get on the phone to phone any hotels to sell this damn stuff? Then 2 years of trying to persuade them to actually do that and then them going down the toilet is
and you see a lot of that. You do. In fact, the example I was thinking of was that actually a guy that started up a consultancy. And a lot of it was about product development for him and what he was going to say to his clients and all this. And I could see the writing on the wall because, I met him a month later and nothing had changed. And I just wish, he'd just gone, right, this is how I'm going to execute. And these decisions are going to make a really big difference. Such as speaking to clients because they're the ones that pay the bills.
You see, there is a very big difference between our model and perhaps some of the consulting models that people might be trying to start. Our model is very clear. We have the people that operationally run the business and we have the people that consult. The biggest barrier to growth for consulting firms and training firms, ironically, is that if you are the consultant or the trainer and the salesperson, you will always have a higher level of oscillation in your mood based upon the fact that I've got loads of work. Oh God, I'm on site now doing a load of work, and then suddenly I'm not, and now I've got to sell it. So a really good piece of advice is actually you've got to have a good business partnership should have the operational element and then the delivery element, because you can't do everything. So you see a lot of training companies that get to 3 or 4 people and then never get any bigger.
That's right. Scale then becomes a real
Scaling
issue.
is a real issue. I mean, you're just a contractor otherwise, ultimately. So making the leap requires investment to having a couple of people that can do all the other stuff that you don't want to do if you're an expert in.
And it might be that same point around planning versus execution, but for those, your junior colleagues, what is it for you here at Kubrick that you find most frequently holds junior colleagues back? What is it that separates the best of your team from the good or the okay?
I mean, I would say I've got a recent example. There's a few. I would say that urgent versus important. What they think is probably really, really urgent and important. I'd probably debate whether it is. The impact around that decision. I think sometimes people may not, it might feel like it's got a huge impact, decision they have to make or what they have to do.
Yeah.
And it probably isn't. And I don't necessarily think that comes with experience. I think that comes with them breaking the problem down, actually understanding it and asking them and stopping and pausing and asking themselves that question.
Yeah. I was going to say that. I think the biggest thing we learned in our training and development was we had to train people how to solve problems properly. So where fools rush in, you know, when I was younger, my mother and father used to have all these really boring sayings like where fools rush in. And I used to think, what a load of rubbish. And then I find myself in my mid-40s.
So
and I actually find myself saying these things now to a lot of these people, and they are actually true, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And actually, I would say where fools rush in. So, you know, none of our clients want to pay us money for someone to do a load of work that doesn't solve the problem. So, you know, those that are really, really good spend a lot of time asking all of the right questions to accelerate the solution.
Yeah, really define the problem.
And define the problem. And that is a common problem. And I can't tell you the number of times we go to meetings and meet some of these clients and they tell us what they want doing, and we spend an hour asking them a load of questions, and then we walk out and the client says, which I think is great compliment to us, walk out saying, actually, we didn't know really what we wanted from you. Yeah, that's great for us because that does our credibility a world of good. And I say the other one finally is that people that do really well tend to have good ethics, good values. They care about other people. They seek first to understand others rather than effectively be understood themselves. Put other people first. And these are just some basic values that I really do believe actually do you very well in life and in a career. And you know, and if you've got a good degree of self-awareness, and you know, you're not too up yourself, then I think generally that's quite a big differentiator.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. And so we've covered a huge range of topics from building businesses to that point you were just highlighting around, well, firstly, phrases your parents would have told you. Maybe there's a book on that, and sort of what it is for you that separates your best people from the sort of the good people. Be really interested in terms of books or, you know, ways that people can learn this. You know, what books, if you do you find yourself recommending, and take this how you want, to maybe the entrepreneurs who you invest in, maybe to people who say, I want to start a consulting business like yours, or maybe it's your team who come in hungry saying, you know, I want to learn, what books should I read?
There was one book that both Tim and I used a lot when I suppose the seed of the idea of Kubrick or changing the business was going to happen. It was a book called First Be Nimble. And I won't go into too many details, but it's about a chocolate frog and a chocolate factory, and basically how to be brave and innovate. And it's written by a guy called Graham Winter. And it effectively, I think we've touched on it earlier, but it talks about execution. It talks about innovate. Don't talk about it. Don't pontificate. You know, do it. Be brave and do it. And the other one that we use a lot, both in YouTube videos he does, but also Burke's, is Simon Sinek. And that is maybe a lot as well, because I think he has some very, very good views on employing millennials and young people. And he shares, or he definitely shares some of the same views. But there's a great book called Start With Why. So many people want to rush in and say what the solution is to something, or, you know, but they don't start with the why. And get an emotional connection from someone. And that's definitely what we tried to do with the setup of Kubrick, was actually get a bit more of an emotional connection from the people that join us of why, and also from the people that use us. Not just talking, you know, we talk about giving them greater choice. We don't pile in with talking about we're a data consultancy and we do Python and we do SQL and things like that. So I'd say it was those two books definitely, I think, are instrumental.
Yeah. And Hello Magazine. That's always a good one.
Yeah. so you can keep up with the news, the gossip news with our guys. Yeah.
I've got to say, I've not had any guest recommend Hello yet. So
I was actually,
that's the tip for keeping up with millennials, is it? Read Hello so you know who's on Love Island. Is it Love
Love
Island?
Island, yes, that's just started.
They talk about that a lot.
Yeah. I've got to. I've got to say actually that it goes to show, doesn't it, that. I don't actually read that much. I was listening to Simon thinking, oh God, yeah, I do remember that book because you said the chocolate frog.
Yeah.
But I'm very much of the.
Well, I think
we're kicking on a bit, and we do act like the younger generation.
But
Because in many respects, I would actually just go to YouTube and type something in.
But I genuinely reckon it's only those two. Simon Sinek.
Well, Who Moved My Cheese was a book that I read 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, because it was short and the words were big.
No pictures though, so well done.
No pictures.
Yeah, and that's definitely good about how to cope with change.
Yeah,
changing environment.
But the point is, very little actually does change, really. I mean, we've been very successful, I think, in bringing in ex-military into our HQ. And I think they find there's a stigma attached, incorrectly, in my opinion, that, you know, they talk a different language, you know, and they come to Civvy Street and all this type of stuff. But actually, I think if you actually just look at how they're taught to lead, manage, and give ownership to people, it's a misconception that they just bark orders kind of thing.
That's right.
I'm pretty
team,
sure,
isn't it, as well?
Yeah, that's
They're
right.
really
How to work
really
as a
good
team.
team players.
And I'm pretty sure that, you know, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, you know, at Harvard Business School, when they first started writing their management books, that they probably originated from actually how the First and Second World War, people in the armed forces learned how to motivate and clearly give people ownership and get them to do stuff. So I don't think actually a lot changes really, if I'm entirely honest, culturally and things of that nature. So if you've read that book 10 years ago, I mean, I think you could hand out Who Moved Your Cheese to any large-scale monolithic brand, you know, then...
I read it about a year ago, and I think it's spot on. You know, and I think that's a really interesting point, as you say, actually, that people add different colours and flavours, but in essence, what works, and it's about driving forward with that. Yeah. So, last question, and thank you so much for your time. It's been really enjoyed it. Last question, and this is one I ask all my guests, and it's to give a point piece of advice to three people, and that's three people on their different areas in their consulting journey. And feel free to take this from your time running Kubrick, from your time running Hydrogen, is you've got three people in front of you. One of those is just starting their career in consulting, so maybe just about to start, maybe a few months into or a month or so into your training. You've got someone who's 4 to 5 years in, so sort of, in my parlance, a senior consultant manager, but they're middle grades. And then you've got one who is approaching partner, and you can take that one how you want, but in effect someone who's about to come up to an equity position or a senior management position. What one piece of advice would you give to each one?
Well, the youngest group, I'd be probably saying to them, why haven't they applied to us? I think probably for the middle group, there is an ever greater need to demonstrate that you're generating work effectively, positively contributing by bringing in business and things of that nature. And I think the earlier that you do that within a consultancy business, the more you're likely to get noticed. Because, that money talks in that respect. Right. And, it's really great to be that technical expert, and you will get so far. But actually, if you can't effectively generate income for the organisation, that can be quite limiting to your career. So I think for those people in that middle particular area, that would be the other thing I talked about. And also not to really ever consider yourself to be too much of a technical expert, because that does tend to limit the ability for you to be mobile within your career. I think it's important to have a very deep knowledge in whatever it is you're focused in, but also to be able to make sure you find the time and the space to be able to not get stuck in that in that area is really important, basically, because otherwise you get stuck.
Yeah, and I think with one approaching partner, it's actually be brave. Because I think when people start approaching partner, they've quite a burden of risk, really, because they've being an age of coming to partner, they've probably got families to look after and things like that. But if they want to get to partner and get noticed, they have to be brave with their strategy, and they have to know the market that surrounds them and understand, how that market's changing, and not just try to kind of camouflage themselves in the norm, in the hope that they won't make any mistakes, because that doesn't make the best partner. Yeah. And then just flipping back on apart from in the people beginning their career of why haven't they applied to us, the other thing that I would actually say is be knowledgeable about the area they're going in. We speak to Kubrick, we have the privilege of speaking to a lot of people in that position. And unfortunately, the ones we don't take on are the ones that, and there is a lot of them, that do not know what's going on in the market. And actually, they should be well read in the market they want to go into. They should be absorbing themselves in meetups and news and what's going on and who are the biggest changes and the why and how's it affecting the industry, or even when it comes to data, which is something we ask at Kubrick, how is it affecting your lives day to day? And I think that's really important. Yeah,
and don't spend too long on social media with all the buzzwords.
No, that's right.
Playing blockchain bingo.
No, that's right. Yeah, really know the market, because we'll see through it. So.
There are a huge amount of crypto blockchain experts now.
Yeah, huge amount. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of very artificially intelligent people out there.
Fantastic. I think that's a brilliant place to finish. So, Simon, Tim, thank you so much for your time. If people have listened to this, they want to find out more about Kubrick, they want to find out more about you, or like you said, they want to apply. Where would you point them to? Where can they get in touch?
Well, I'm quite old-fashioned, so telephones are good for me. And emails. So
Okay.
I mean, also contact Simon or I. Or
I think on this
website.
podcast, we'll contact Tim or I and look at our website.
Brilliant. Well, I'll put the website. I'll put if it's okay with you guys, I'll put your contact details in the show notes, and let people reach out. Well, Tim, Simon, really enjoyed it, and all the best for the rest of your week.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Climb in Consulting podcast. If you did, I would be very grateful if you could leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcast platform of choice, whichever one you may be using. And please also share this with anyone that you think could benefit from hearing today's interview. If you want to get in touch or give me any feedback about the podcast, please feel free to drop me an email. It's nick@climbinconsulting.com, and I look forward to hearing from you.